It's a cliche to say that all the world is a stage and we are merely players. But unfortunately, that statement is as true today as it was when Shakespeare wrote it all those centuries ago. The problem is the playwright has decided to go unseen and invisible. The playwright has gone a bit mad. You might feel like you're a little bit crazy watching the news or dealing with the mainstream media right now. And that's on purpose. That is a process akin to gaslighting, but at a much larger scale called hypernormalization. And that's what we're going to be talking about together as we walk down creation's path. Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie. I am a Christo-pagan druid and priest of Bridget.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian. I'm a Christo-pagan druid and sous chef to the Dagda.
Today, we're going to be kind of continuing what we talked about yesterday, but really focusing in on hypernormalization, which is one of the most frustrating topics that we're going to be talking about at all. So, we've had the discussion about how our lives are a story that we tell ourselves. Well, hypernormalization is a specific kind of story that is used to maintain a state of crisis so that powerful people don't lose their power. But before we get into all that, if you haven't already, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, whatever the terminology happens to be on whatever app you're currently listening to us on. We do 5 original Christo Pagan and Druid episodes Monday through Friday every week. And we're in the middle of our Druidcraft 101 series, and you don't want to miss a thing. All right, let's just get right into it. Hypernormalization is an idea and a term that was coined during the fall of the Soviet Union. Everything was crumbling around them, and they could kind of see the writing on the wall, and they desired a stalling action, something that they could do to maintain what flimsy and thin grasp they had on reality. So they made their own. They invented their own out of whole cloth. They divorced the reality that they talked about from the reality of what was actually going on around them. They would acknowledge certain pain points that were just too obvious to ignore, but would put various explanations or blames that didn't reflect directly to them. They created through the use of sophisticated propaganda and people's desires to think everything will be fine soon, to weave an intricate series of lies to gaslight an entire population so that by the time the collapse came, many people were shocked because they didn't believe it could happen. That state of decay was just a perpetual, ongoing problem that would never end. Then it did. And these tools of the darkest of arts were picked up by many of the darkest powers throughout the world to maintain their power as well. Unfortunately for Russia, they had a brief flirtation with actual real that quickly diverted back into a hyper realism created by Vladimir Putin. And we have been listening to the siren song in this country since the late 70s. It starts with the moral majority, Pat Robertson and Jerry Falwell. It follows the rise of just unhinged liars like Rush Limbaugh, who crafted and built complete alternative reality for their listeners and viewers to live in. This gets solidified when you get Roger Ailes taking on the reins over at Fox News, really entrenching this hyper reality more and more and more to the point where reality itself doesn't matter. It's a very complex system of gaslighting and propaganda. But if it's the only thing you're ever hearing, it feels normal. See, in a lot of ways, hypernormalization is the way that a cult operates. It's the way that authoritarian states have always run. The only difference is it tends to have to deal with reality every now and then because it bumps into it. The economy's not doing good. Well, we need to scapegoat somebody, point fingers over to somebody else. Uh-oh, a pandemic happened. Well, let's scapegoat and point fingers somewhere else. The moral of the story, and this is kind of the hallmark of hypernormalization, and the thing that makes it very easy to see is the message, we are all fine. but they're the baddies. We're fine, but nothing is ever actually fine. So this not being fine is actually fine. This is the way it is. This is how we have to live. And you can see this in the embrace of the chaos that we've seen in both Trump administrations. You can see this in the way that the Bush administration ran the Iraq war, the Afghanistan war. And I really hate to say this, but it's true. You can see this in the way both Barack Obama and Joe Biden ran their administrations. You see, the stock market is not the economy. The stock market is how rich people make bets with other rich people to make themselves money. The actual economy is how we're doing. It deals with inflation and cost of food and our wages. None of that's been going well for a while. We remember the various financial crashes. Like, I can't even say financial crisis because the first question is which one? Because they just keep happening. Naomi Klein, in her wonderful book, Disaster Capitalism, discusses all of this all the way back in the early 2000s. She predicted everything that was going to happen in Iraq and Afghanistan. And the problem is, we can see it as it's happening here. By the way, it also explains what's about to happen in Gaza. It's a book that oddly holds up all these years later. How do we actually deal with this? Once you realize that reality is constructed, and I need you all to realize I'm not talking about some new age, like we make the world, we manifest our reality into being, or any of that crap. That's not what I'm talking about. Reality is constructed. We are given words, we're given symbols, we're given concepts, and everything fits into those boxes. You think work is going to a job and selling your body and your labor to another person because that is the way like work has been defined. That's not what work is. Many people actually work for themselves. They're not selling their work, their bodies, their labor to someone else. They're doing the work for themselves. We can see this in artisans who are able to create art and sell it. Musicians do this. Not all musicians. Some musicians are essentially wage labor by another name. Yes, they don't actually feel it. It's not actually coming from within them. We think that we own land. We think that we have some say over the plot of land that we live on because I mortgaged it. I paid all those months to the bank. I paid it off. I have the deed. That's a story. The government owns that land. You still owe taxes on that land. If you don't pay your taxes on that land, the government will revoke your lease, which is what that deed is, because you always have a landlord. Remember in the last episode when we talked about the enclosures? No way to live without a landlord. We enclosed the commons. We created the lie of private property, which is property that has been enclosed by the government, by the way. It has nothing to do with your personal property. We don't actually have a lot of personal property rights. See, there are loopholes in the law that they can do whatever they want to your personal property, but there are a lot of restrictions on how they treat your private property. They can come into your house and there are certain rules about how they treat the house, but oh, they can steal your money. Civil asset forfeitures is what that's called. If the government raids your home, they can just take your money. They don't have to give it back to you. They can just take it and take anything that they want to and claim, oh, well, we just have it now. They don't have to show that you committed a crime and they don't have to show that it was related to the crime. They can just take it because personal property doesn't matter. And this is the big lie that we've been sold. This is part of this big lie that we're living under. We've been convinced that private property and personal property are the same thing, but they're not. Private property is the land that you're on, that land that can be resold and redeveloped, that land that whether you're paying rent to a landlord or you're paying rent to the government as your landlord, that's the private property. All your personal stuff, oh, they can do whatever they want to with that. You ever had your house get broken into? Try very hard to find your stuff. That's personal property. If we're going to actually face down this threat of hypernormalization, we have to see the story. This is why we're always talking about seeing the hidden powers that are controlling our lives. And yeah, sometimes those are spiritual things, the angels and demons and subtle energies moving through the cosmos. But a lot of the times, they're stories and beliefs and ideas that have been placed on us. Why are egg prices so high? Because we've allowed factory farming to create such large populations of enclosed chickens that if one chicken gets a disease, it floods throughout the entire population of them and they all have to be culled. Oops, chicken prices and egg prices go up. because we're not treating the chickens right. But no, don't worry about that. It's weird economic factors. It's this political party or that political party, or somehow it's the immigrants' fault. Which I always love that one because I don't understand what anybody crossing the border from Mexico has to do with egg prices. Like I do understand what it has to do with like potato and vegetable prices because they either cross the border and pick it or it just goes rotten on the field because no one
Yeah.
in this country is going to pick those vegetables. We know that for a fact. We've done this dance before and the food just rotted on the field because nobody wanted the jobs. So we have to see these stories. We have to see through them for what they are.
Well, it's like the story of deregulation, which is another issue that is affecting. We're told nobody wants somebody coming in and telling them they have to do something. Freedom, hoorah. But the thing is no, we do. We want an oversight body to come in and say, hey, if you're handling my food, don't poison me. We want an oversight body to go in and go, hey, if you're building my house, the wiring has to be safe enough to not burn the house down with me inside it.
So let's put that in the language that we've been using to help people see through these lies. We've been talking about a lot about the enclosures where communal property was turned into private property. That's what deregulation is. Deregulation is an enclosure act. Every time something is deregulated, they are legally saying this good, this product, this service no longer has any obligations to the commons. It is not held in common good or common trust. It is allowed to be held as the private fiefdom and property of whatever liege lord controls it. That's what deregulation actually is. That's what deregulation actually means. It doesn't mean we're clearing out the way to make things easier to do. It means we're saying that we have no common interest in making sure the machines don't rip people's bodies apart. Because, we had to do that because they were literally feeding children into the weaving machines and they were getting ripped apart. So we regulated. People were falling into the meat processing machines and we were eating them. So we regulated it. Regulation is a weak but effective and, under our current system, necessary way of taking something out of its private enclosure and putting it into the commons. Because that's really what's at stake here. They want to have the power to control everything so that they can run their numbers up. Why do we want to deregulate the energy industry? It's not because we're running short. We're producing a lot of energy. We're producing more energy. We actually have technology that could be making energy almost free. Did you know that we've had since the technology to recycle nuclear waste and make more energy out of it? And the process of recycling that nuclear waste not only produces more energy, but makes the resulting nuclear waste from that second run less radioactive and radioactive for less time. And that refinement process can happen repeatedly to actually make byproduct less dangerous over time instead of storing it in barrels and vats and large concrete containers. We could have been using and reusing that. We have enough waste in storage that if we started recycling it, we could power all of the United States just off of that waste for 100 to 150 years. That's truth. That's real. That is a thing that exists right now. And there are a few companies trying to make that a reality right now. But see, renewable energy is a thing of the future, even though we've had these technologies since the 50s, because that's not where the moneyed interests are right now. The moneyed interests are still in oil. So they tell us a story. How can we see through these stories? Anytime somebody is talking about government overreach, we need to ask a simple question. Is this an act of the government trying to do something for the common good? Clean water legislation is very near and dear to my heart. We lost my family land because a mining company put so much mercury into the creek that ran through it. The government gave them the right to steal it from us for pennies of what it used to be worth. My family earned that land from fighting in the Civil War. That was our land granted to us for fighting in the Civil War. It's gone now. My father and aunts don't have it. My siblings and I and cousins won't have it. It's gone because they didn't take care of the water. They didn't take care of the mining. They weren't properly regulated and there wasn't proper oversight there. Even scarier than that, that poison water runs down that creek into the river that runs right through the town I live in. Think I don't care about that mercury in the water? Yeah, I want them to have regulations on how much and how you have to deal with that so that the mercury doesn't get in the water in the first place. That's not an overreach. That's taking something for the common good. That's a very helpful rubric to start understanding what these people are actually wanting. Who's the benefit here? Is it the corporation that's going to benefit? Is it the profits the corporation's going to benefit? Or is it the rest of us that are going to benefit? And sometimes it's tricky.
Be very difficult to discern it. And that's the thing too. It's like even the conversation of taxes, those trying to forward hypernormalization or utilize or who are using the tools of hypernormalization will just simply push forward the simple narrative of taxes are bad. Nobody wants your money stolen. That's the story they try to pitch. Well, it's easy to agree. No one wants their money stolen. They worked hard for that money. They don't want it taken away by anybody. But that's the lie. That's what they're trying to normalize and the lie they're trying to get everyone to buy into.
Because look
The
at whose
real
taxes they're lowering.
Yeah, the real debate over taxes is not that taxes are bad because we all we all benefit from the commons and we need a government to help oversee the commons and to help the commons prosper. The taxes help to fund that government and to fund overseeing those commons. The real debate is how that money is spent, where it goes. And so it's easy to get caught up in that story of taxes are bad. Well, taxes are good. The people that need that food, the education programs, as we're seeing, all these programs that are currently being under attack do so much good. The Social Security, all of that is
They're attacking
very important.
Meals on
Meals on
Wheels.
Wheels. These are all very good programs. The thing is there nobody's looking at the large percentage of the budget that goes into paying for the wars and the arms, the military arms, and the private contractors. Because that's the
The
thing is they're using this taxes are bad narrative to distract everyone, and they've even hypernormalized budget cuts so that people just think budget cuts. They don't even think what they're cutting and what are the large expenses. Like a lot of people will do household budgets. When you're doing your household budget, when you're sitting back going, I need to cut back on some of those expenses, the first thing most people look at is, well, what am I actually spending a lot of money on? Like, what are the big areas? Because if you want a big impact, you got to affect the big areas. The small stuff is going to take too much to add up.
Since Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, we have had many decades to look at the effects of privatization. And we have learned a few things. It always makes the costs go up and the efficiency of the programs go down. Always, every time,
Every
every
time.
single time. There, I have never seen an example of it doing the opposite. Not one. And I've looked because in my heart of hearts, the idea of privatization appealed to me originally. And I turned against it not because of some philosophical objection, which I have now, but because it was wasteful. It was more wasteful. It's not actually accomplishing any of the aims. And that's why I said the easiest way to start seeing through all this and to start combating this is to understand this idea of what do we have in common? What is the common good? And what is the private good? Because the private good always means it goes to the powerful. We always want to believe this is the power of capitalism that we will eventually be one of those rich people, but we're not. The likelihood of winning that lottery and making it into that upper echelon, especially now that the upper echelon's in the hundreds of millions to the dollars, like used to, and maybe you could be a millionaire. Maybe you could be a millionaire in your lifetime, maybe. But now we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. Like there, that cutoff line is going up and up and up and up. They're wanting to privatize the profits for themselves. They're wanting to privatize these industries for themselves and for their own benefit, not for our communal benefit, not for our common benefit. And that's where you can really start seeing through these lies, through this weird, these weird distortions that are coming alike, right? So during the pandemic, do your own research was such a common refrain. I can't do my own research. I don't have a machine that lets me pull up and do genetic sequencing. I can't do that. I know how to read those things basically, but I'm not skilled at being able to look at the genomes that were published. This is what experts are for. There are certain things you can't do your own research on. As anybody who's ever tried to serve as their own lawyer has learned, the law is too complex. You need a specialist. Medicine is even more complex. Physics is even more complex. There are things that do require and need specialists for. See, the lie that gets told, the basic lie that we're operating under, is a misunderstanding of what science is. See, and everyone has perpetuated this lie. There's not one of us that's innocent for this. We tell ourselves the sweet lie that not science is in search of the truth. That is not true. That is a lie. Science is in search of the basic mechanisms that make things happen. That's different from truth. And it's running models, it's doing tests, it's checking things. It can be wrong and corrected. The purpose of science is to find the probabilistic model. This is most likely what's going on. More than likely, this is what's going on. And for everyone who wants to find certainty in science, you're looking in the wrong place because nothing in this universe is certain. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Remember, up until Copernicus and Galileo, the math worked. That Ptolemaic geocentric world, the math worked for everything that they knew to look for. That math worked. And then we were able to see a little bit better. And why does Mercury go into retrograde? That's kind of weird. Oh wait, there are moons around Saturn and Jupiter? Well, that's weird. And the math stopped working. And new math had to be discovered and new physics had to be discovered to figure out. And it changed everything. We went from being the center of the cosmos on a stable, solid, unmovable to being a planet, one of eight or one of 8,000, depending on whether or not you count the dwarf planets, circling a star among hundreds of billions of stars, amongst hundreds of billions of galaxies. And every time we learn something, our understanding of reality changes because it has ripple effect. See, knowledge is ever growing and changing and evolving. When you say that something is the truth, it makes it feel static. And this is how the lie that they're committing on us right now works. They just don't know what they're talking about because they keep changing things. Remember when the hole in the ozone layer was going to kill us all? Well, where is it? We regulated chlorofluorocarbons and the hole in the ozone layer closed up. That's why that apocalypse never happened. We fixed it. We fixed it. There you go. We fixed it. That's the answer. But see, they're not looking for the answer. They don't tell you the answer. They're not even looking for it. They just want you to doubt that there's any empirical information out there that can go against their story. See, they
This
did
is
all this regulation based on a lie because we're still here.
this is why for me, one of the very helpful tools that I found is the simple statement. The only real certainty is blind faith. Because the minute they start speaking from that absolute certainty position, it's a discussion of religion now. It is blind faith.
It's worse than
And
religion.
yeah, it's zealotry.
It's a cult.
It's a cult. And so that's what I'm just like, okay, this is a cult conversation. And most of the times then I can just politely try to excuse myself out of it or go, ooh, look at that shiny thing and run away. Because I'm interacting with cult interaction at that point. And there it's just going to be once again, you can see those systems, those powers and principalities at play, and you know, ah, okay, I can see this thing is just trying to manipulate and control me, and you can nope out.
Anytime you see someone trying to get you to buy into certainty, this is absolutely 100% the truth, the way it is. Just know that they're lying. The only times that that's might possibly be true is if you're going to a doctor for a diagnosis.
This is also why we take time to explain what faith is, because it's about the hope for things. There's a difference between hoping a thing is right and gathering what evidence and facts together to make the best guess and hope you're right versus blind faith, which is just this belief that you're right, whether you're right or wrong.
Faith and doubt have to exist on a spectrum. And for anybody who tells you otherwise, if they call themselves a Christian, tell them that they are blaspheming the Holy Spirit and they need to read up on that. Because even Jesus, night before the crucifixion, was there in the garden, so worked up, he's sweating and crying tears of blood. So emotional. You don't understand. This is something that can really happen to a person. This isn't just storytelling for storytelling's sake. If you get truly in a state of hyper arousal where your emotions are running wild, you can start bleeding from your skin and from your eyes. And he cries out, if this is possible, take this cup away from me. Just say, Can we not do this? On the cross, he cries out, my Father, why have you abandoned?" Those are moments of doubt from the very person that these people say is God. And we see even him experiencing doubt because faith and doubt are on a spectrum. They exist together, they will always exist together. Just reject any getting you to accept certainty and just be very mindful of those who are truly seeking after their own ends and not looking out for the community. Because when they stop caring about the commons, greed kicks in, and it's greed for them, not for us, for them, because the moneyed interests will always win in any of those fights. I hope that this episode has helped you out. This is something we could talk about forever because this is a rabbit hole that just goes so deep down. Maybe there's a particular form or instance of hypernormalization you would like us to talk about in future, or if you want to share your experience with us or how you help work your way through it, you can leave that in the comments down below. If you're listening to us on YouTube or Spotify, you can leave a comment right there. If you're listening to us anywhere else, even if they say you can leave a comment, they don't let us know about it. So you leave a comment there anyway, because engagement is magic. But then head over to creationpaths.com, click on chat, and you can leave a comment there. While you're there, if you happen to have any money you can pass our way, we offer monthly and annual memberships. You can also support us on Ko-fi and Patreon. I'm C. Dorset on both. And we also now have a Cash App with the hashtag Creations Paths where you can give directly to us there. Thank you to everybody who helps us out in that way. It helps us keep the lights on, keep a roof over our head, and food on the table. If you don't have any money right now, or you don't think that we're the kind of people that you would like to give your hard-earned treasure to, that's perfectly all right. But if anything that we've ever done has inspired you, helped you, or you think somebody else will like it, please share it with them. That helps us out immensely. Now, I call on this angel a lot because he's one of my favorites. And I think he gets the short end of the stick, gets turned into something that he's not. Blessed Saint Michael, the archangel, the angel of compassion, whose sword cuts through truth and lies and separates good from evil. Help us to wield that sword of discernment so that we can see through the lies that are told to us and the stories that are made to keep us under other people's thumbs. Help us to work constantly for liberation and help us get to the end. Amen.
Amen.